Welcome to the Advance Your Art podcast, where we talk about the journey from artist to entrepreneur and everything in between. You've worked hard to hone your craft. Now take it to the next level with tips, techniques, strategies, and routines used by successful artists to grow their businesses and careers. Now, let's get started and have some fun with your host, Yuri Cataldo.
Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. It's my pleasure. I'd like to start off by asking you to describe yourself and what it is that you do.
Sure. So we'll go way back to February 1985 when I was born. No, I'm just kidding. We won't go back that far. So my basic background, I went to college. I grew up in the Denver area. I went to the University of Colorado for my undergrad in finance, and then the University of Denver for my MBA, also in finance. Not surprisingly, I worked in finance for a while. My first job out of college, I was a bank manager. I was the guy responsible for mortgages, new credit card applications, pretty much anything that happened that came through the front door of our branch that wasn't a big commercial deal went through me. And I was there for not all that long in the scheme of things. It was a great learning experience, not the right company for me. So I took an opportunity to jump ship and moved over to the telecom world. And I was there for a while, bounced around a bit after that in FP&A, financial planning and analysis, if you don't have a finance background. But more or less, I was in that world of finance and accounting, living in gray cubicles for about 10 years. And during that time, I started this little personal finance blog as a side hustle. I actually started it just after I stopped working in the bank. I saw there were a few other personal finance blogs at the time. You know, my blogs, it was started in 2008, which makes me about 95 in blogger years. I'm like a dinosaur blogger. But there were these other personal finance blogs. I thought, you know what, I have a finance degree. I used to run a bank. I can do this. I can write. So I started this little personal finance blog. It was originally narrowbridgeadventures.blogspot.com because I didn't know anything about blogging in 2008. I learned a little bit along the way. Now it's personalprofitability.com. But that little website led to a lot of opportunities along the way. You know, it started out, it was making almost no money, which I didn't really care. It was just a little hobby. Eventually I started making, $10 for a sponsorship or something here and there. Eventually reached a point that it was paying all my bar tabs, which I thought was really impressive because I was in my mid-20s. So I was at the bars a lot with my friends. Happy hour was one of my favorite sports. So I was really excited. I was like, wow, I'm making a few $100s a month from this internet thing. This is like real money here, not just like one of those scams you see on a, nailed to a stoplight post that says, work from home, make $5,000 a month. And like, I was actually making real money on the internet. And it wasn't $5,000 a month, but it was real money. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I kept working at it, and I started going to an annual conference called FinCon. It's a financial blogging and media conference, and I've gotten very involved with that community. Mm-hmm. And through networking and connections, I kept learning more and trying new things, and my audience was growing. And then one day a company said, hey, will you write for our blog and we'll pay you? I was like, oh, well, you can pay me and I'll do just about anything. So let alone writing. So I took that. I said, well, sure. And, it wasn't all that much. It was, if memory serves, about $25 for that first post. But that was what really led to the career path that allowed me to quit my job last year. So that freelance writing, because of my blog, became a growing and growing part of my income until in 2015, I made $40,000 as a side hustle. So that was extra revenue on top of what I was making at work, which mm-hmm. I was working 50, 60 hours a week, whatever you do in finance, sitting in my gray cubicles. And I'd come home and I'd write and I'd work on my website on evenings and weekends, sometimes to the chagrin of my girlfriend / fiance / now wife. And, it was a lot of hours I put in. But, at $40,000, that was the point I said, I was living in Portland at the time. I'd left Denver. I wanted an adventure, try something new. So we were in Portland. And I said to my wife, $40,000 a year is like the median household income for this city, which I had to look up. I didn't just know that off the top of my head. But I was like, wow, I'm like
you
making
didn't have that You didn't have that site memorized right off the top of your head?
No.
Right.
I tried to memorize GDP by state, but it's a tough. No. So
Sure.
when I looked it up, I was like, wow, I'm like this is what most families live on, and that's what I'm making on the side. Maybe I could really make a go at this. I'd always kind of dreamt about it before. I was like, oh, I'm making this money online. How cool would it be to have that be my whole job? But that was the point at the end of 2015 where I realized, well, I might actually be able to do this. And also at the end of 2015, I had a about 3-month-old daughter. I was my first and only daughter. And, like any responsible parent, about 2 months later, I said to my wife, I think we should sell our house and move somewhere more expensive, and I'm going to quit my job. So that's what we did. We sold our house in Portland. I quit my high-paying job as a senior financial analyst, and we moved down to sunny Southern California. We live in a city called Ventura. It's about 20 minutes from my in-laws. My wife grew up in Santa Barbara, not too far up the road from us. So for her, it was kind of like moving back home. For me, it was like moving to one of the most expensive places on earth. I had some sticker shock when I got here for sure. But as a guy who had just quit my job with a baby, I knew it'd be okay. So I got to work. My last day at work was actually April 8th, 2016. It was a Friday, and we were still in Portland for a couple weeks after that. But I went home that day and I sat down at the computer and I started writing because I knew this was my job now. Before it was something I did because I enjoyed it and I made money. It became my job on April 8th last year, and it has been an awesome ride since. Actually, my online income from that 2015 number I had cited has about tripled or a little more. So I'm making now I'm on track for about 125 to 130,000 this year if everything goes as it has through the first half of the year. And I can't complain. Things are good.
Wow, that's absolutely wonderful. It's great hearing your story throughout that. So it's also a really good reminder that it just when people have ideas to start a side hustle, that it doesn't just happen overnight and it takes time. Like yours is 9 years. Yeah,
it was. I like to joke at the time I left my job, it only took me 8 years to become an overnight success.
Exactly.
Well, that's what everyone looks like on the internet, right? You see these people who you've never heard of. They come out of nowhere. All of a sudden, you're like, holy cow, you make like 6 figures on the internet sitting at home in your pajamas? Like, what? No way. Or like, you travel the world and live in hostels and you live out of a backpack. Like, how glamorous is that? And you make 6 figures online doing it? Like, that seems crazy, right? Like, they don't teach you that in high school as a career path. They talk about, I guess nowadays it's a hot button political issue. They talked about factory jobs, stable things that are part of the American economy. But, when we were kids going to school, internet entrepreneur wasn't a job that existed. I mean, the internet hardly existed. It was just this ARPANET thing that the military and some universities connected some computers together. They ran punch cards through. Like, it was a very different world when we were kids than the day that we're, all about to get into self-driving cars. So, But that was like this crazy thing. I kept seeing all these people doing that, and I was always like, well, how can they go make, $4,000 their first month online? Odds are they didn't make it their first month online. It was just their first month writing about how much they made online.
Right. Of course. Yeah, they're not gonna write about the first actual month online where they maybe had like one person show up for whatever it is they were talking about and they made a couple dollars. That's not as cool of a story.
If you go to personalprofitability.com, that's my main website. There's a link at the top that says income reports. And I actually I have an income report that breaks out my revenue and expense every single month back to 2012. So it's not as old as the blog,
sure.
But that's a lot of months of income reports. So it's a way I try to be transparent and help people and say, hey, I'm a real person. I'd like to think I'm special. My mom told me I'm special growing up, just like everyone else. But in reality, we're all pretty similar. And it's just how hard are we willing to work for what we want? And for me, it became a priority to have a life where I could be at home with my daughter. I didn't mention, I joked that I was, the responsible dad quitting my job. But there was a day, the week before I gave my notice, that one morning I woke up and went to work and my daughter had not woken up yet, and I got home for the day and she was already asleep for the night. It's like, wow, I don't get to see my daughter all day. Like, what's worth that? I mean, yeah, I was going to a good job that paid me well. It allowed me to, pay for the house that my daughter was sleeping in that I didn't get to see her in. But, there's definitely some downsides to traditional employment that I wanted to break free from. And that was what really motivated me to do what I saw, again, from going to these conferences, I saw my friends doing. A lot of us started at the same point with a regular job, being normal people. And, normal people, I say that in quotation marks, like people who work on the internet are not normal people. Mm-hmm. But, we had normal jobs like most people working at a big company. And over time, I kept seeing these success stories happen again and again and again. And I was really excited when it became my turn.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What is it about finance that makes you interested in it? Because obviously, you went to school for finance, you've been working for finance for years and years and years, and now you're writing about it and have a podcast about it. So what is about finance that really gets you excited?
I mean, it goes like way back. I think there's some genetic thing that it's like in your genes. My grandpa was a college professor at a business school. He taught marketing, and then my dad, he was originally on the lawyer path, but ended up following in my grandpa's footsteps and going into merchandising and marketing. And now I'm in a way doing content marketing and digital marketing. So I guess it partially runs in the family, the business and the marketing side. But what really excites me and got me going with this blog and what I'm doing with my path now, it's a lot of people look at their money. Actually, I'll tell you the story of how I named the blog in the beginning, that horrible name I mentioned a few minutes ago, narrowbridgeadventures.blogspot.com. So Narrow Bridge, it's actually the name of my media company is Narrow Bridge Media. Narrow Bridge comes from a Jewish song from a rabbi who's a like great, like eight greats uncle of mine. Like way distant, but still a famous rabbi that I'm related to, so I feel like I can brag about it. So the song, it's a really famous song in the Jewish world. In Hebrew, it's Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar me'od. That means the whole world is a very narrow bridge. So narrow bridge that's where I got that from. And the song, if you translate it, it's only 2 lines. It means the whole world is a very narrow bridge, and the most important thing is to not be afraid. So when I started the blog, I was looking at my money and how I dealt with it. And I was lucky at that point when I started the blog, I didn't have student loans. I got a full ride for undergrad. Mm-hmm. But in my MBA program, I did pick up $40,000 in student loans. There's that 40,000 number again. Maybe that's a special number in my life. There's a symbolism here I'm picking up. So a lot of people, money's scary. It's something they don't understand. We don't learn about it in elementary school or middle school or high school. You can become a graduate of a high school in the United States and not know how credit cards and checking accounts work. Mm-hmm. It's just this mystery and black box. And if we can break through that fear and cross that narrow bridge, as the song says, there's so much opportunity. A lot of people say, like I'm right about travel quite a bit. I was just at a travel blogging conference called TBEX. And when I was talking to people there coming from finance, they're like, oh, how does a finance blogger end up at a travel blogger conference? I said, well, what's the number one reason most people don't travel? It's money. Oh, yeah. So, they go hand in hand. The reason you don't do anything in life, a lot of people, it's either because they don't have the time or the money, and usually they don't have the time because they don't have the money. So it all kind of goes hand in hand. So if people can learn how to better master their money and take control and use it as a tool, they can use money to live the life they want rather than use money as an excuse for not living the life they want.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. It's because I'm in that same boat of never really learning much about money as a tool until after finishing graduate school and not getting in. When I started my own company in the early 2000s, long after I probably should have been understanding how all of that
just
actually
a few
works.
Years before finance was going to be everywhere in the news.
Exactly. Well, fortunately for me, I graduated grad school just in time to watch the financial collapse outside of my door, because I was living in Darien, Connecticut at the time, surrounded by a bunch of hedge fund managers.
So we're all terrified they were about to lose their house.